Start asking questions.
Well, you can start asking one if you want.
What's your name?
Emma Florence Hamstead.
Let's see, and today is the
25th.
25th of November, 1977, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right, where were you born, Florence?
England, in a little town called Parkgate, Yorkshire.
In Yorkshire. Okay, and let's see, when were you born?
December the 3rd, I reckon back. George, what year?
07.
1907.
Okay. What's one of your earliest memories?
Tape's good.
Well, it's all right, George. I've got an hour and a half worth on here.
Earliest memory.
30 minutes.
Gonna have to speed up, though, Florence.
I can remember a picture in our front room, but they used to ask me who the picture was, and I used to say it was my first mother.
Okay. And in reality, what was that? Your
Father's first wife.
okay. Now, who were your father and mother?
Thomas Ward and Alice Lancashire.
Okay. Can you think of anything to ask her?
Are you an only child?
No, I was the only child to live, but I was the first child to be born. But my mother had 6 or 7 children after me, but they only lived a short time on account of the blood deficiency that they knew nothing about in those days. Today, those babies would live because in medicine today, they've learned how to take all the blood away from the children and put new blood into them. So if we'd all been born today, instead of 63 years back,
70 years ago.
They would have had a chance today, whereas there was no chance in those days because the doctors weren't learned enough. They weren't learned that far.
So does that mean then that you were raised an only child?
Yes.
Yeah.
But you would have had, what, 6 brothers and
5 or 6, I can't remember to be correct. Only one brother.
6.
I know, but one brother went out of the lot.
5, yes.
Well,
Okay. Do you remember playing with anybody when you were a little girl?
well, yes. No, the one thing that I do remember, when I was real little, I wanted a rabbit, and my father bought me one. And it used to have a bonnet on. My father used to take me down Park Gate with him. This is the town where we lived. And he'd go with me with this rabbit in the doll carriage, and it'd keep popping its head around. And everybody'd laugh when they saw a rabbit instead of a doll. And then another time, we went to my mother's sisters. One of their boys had just got some new clogs. And just imagine me, an only child and a girl, wanting a pair of clogs. So I yelled for a pair of clogs, and my father went and had me a pair made. And I used to clump all over. We had a brick yard, and don't think they didn't sound.
Now, are those wooden shoes?
Wooden shoes with irons on.
Oh my.
That's why they called them clogs. And these irons that used to clitter-clatter, you know, like having what they call cleats today, don't they? That they put in your shoes to prevent the heels wearing down and things like that.
Yeah.
But these were real clogs, and they were handmade. And
How old were you, do you think? Do you remember?
Oh, I wasn't school age. I'd be about 3, I
No,
guess.
5, around 5.
I don't think I was.
That's what your dad told me.
But anyway, these clogs, I used to clump all over in those clogs just to hear the noise, I guess.
Can you remember what your house looked like? Where was it located?
The house.
Yeah. What was it
Yeah,
like?
well, really, in those days, we were living among, in a good area. And it's gotten coarser as the years have gone by, but in the days when I was small, it was a real
Was it an
nice
apartment? Was it
area
a
to
house?
live. No, it was
Yes,
a house.
It was a row house. They were built in long rows, you know.
You know, down a
Not
street.
detached.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And it was called Hollybush Street. And across the top of the street, there was this row of houses that came in the opposite direction, like a letter T to the street.
Oh yeah.
And these were all people belonging to one family. And the father had all these houses across the street built for each one of his children as they grew up. And they had a carriage drive and everything, trees down this drive, and it really was beautiful. It was a nice area.
When did you ever see your first car?
First car?
Yeah, because apparently when you were a little girl, all they had was horses and carriages.
Well, the first car I can remember was a tram car. Really,
Was what?
tram car.
What about an automobile?
No, I can't remember an automobile. There were carriages, horses and carriages in those days. And it seems like it were much, much later when cars came in. I guess I'd be 9 or 10 years old before the cars came. And they weren't as common in England as they are today.
Oh yeah.
With no telephone, only a paid telephone in England for years. And electric light came in. We used to burn a gas light before electric light. And before that it was oil lamps. because I can remember us having a beautiful oil lamp, and the cover over the lampshade was a pretty pink one.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, that was a good many years back from today.
Okay. Go on, run. Kenneth wants to ask a question.
How would you get across the street when they were built across the street?
Well, they went across the road. You mean the houses across the top of the street? Well, they're allowed to come so far, like you're here.
I think, son, what she means when she says it comes across the top of the street is that the street goes this
down
way.
that way, yeah,
And
like
these
a
other
letter
houses
T.
went like this. See, like a letter T. It didn't come up over the top or down into the street or something
No,
like that.
they're all built on the same level. But you see, this street always was a hill. So you see, these houses across the top were on kind of a, now is it summit of the hill?
Mm-hmm.
Top. They were at the summit of the hill, at the top. And then the other houses, you see, were going down and down the street. And then at the bottom of the street, as you got to the corner, there was another road came down there, and that was called Albert Road. And right on the other corner was our first candy store. And that's where I used to buy your mummy and daddy sugar babies. And you know what they used to do?
What?
They used to bite all the heads off first.
So did you lived in Parkgate all of your life then until you came to the States?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I only ever lived in one place.
What was your first school?
Netherfield Lane.
Netherfield Lane?
Mm-hmm.
And you went to school there?
Yes. And I just went down the street to where I've just told you the little store was, and then I turned right turn at the corner, and I went up Albert Road, all the way up Albert Road to the top, and made another left turn, and that was Netherfield Lane.
Okay. And can you remember anything that stands out in your mind about your elementary school days?
Yes, I can remember one thing.
Apparently Mommy's heard it before.
My father told me that if teacher were nasty to me, I wouldn't have to go. No, I'm getting mixed up. That were Melva. But I went to school, and we started to learn to read. I didn't like reading at all in those days, and I've been a good reader ever since. But I made an excuse, told the teacher I was sick, because I didn't want to read. And she let me come home, and I wasn't sick. So that wasn't a very nice thing for me to do, was it? Because I told a lie.
Oh dear.
What about when the teacher knocked you over the
No.
For the what?
thing?
No, we, this was later, when you were starting to learn. And the teacher had me in front of class, and I can't remember what a question or anything at all about it. But she gave me one clout at the side of face and knocked me over the high chair,
Oh dear.
teacher's chair. And my father went up to school, and he told the teacher that if ever she did that anymore, he should report her. He said, "You're not here to chastise the children." He says, "You're here to teach them. And if they don't get it the first time, you're supposed to teach them a second time."
Mm.
But he gave a warning what he should do if ever she did it again. But she never did. And I were in several of her classes. And what I can't understand, we used to have mental arithmetic. You had to work it out in your own head. I don't think they do it here, do they?
Mm-mm.
Mental arithmetic.
No.
Oh, maybe they do. I don't know. They
At
don't.
my school.
They give you questions, and you answer them, and then you check your papers at the end. But this is out of your head. You don't have time to study. It's what they call mental arithmetic.
Okay.
How did you?
And then one day in this period, she put a question to the class, and there were 8 out of the class that got the right answer, and I was among the 8 that gave the right answer. And I worked it out in my own mind, but I couldn't have told her how I worked it out. But I did it mentally, out of my own mind, and it was right. I was among the 8 that...
How many were in the class? Do you remember?
Oh, quite a lot. You know, the classrooms, there were several rows, and there were double rows of desks. And but...
You were really proud of yourself for getting that, huh?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
And as time went on, we started to sew. They taught us sewing, and they taught us just plain knitting. And from this, I went on, and just that little bit of training in the school, and then going to night school later on. I took tailoring and millinery in school when I was,
Well, now, what was this going to night school all about?
Well, it's not for elementary. It's something like after a college thing.
Okay, so...
It's you're grown up now.
And you were working during the day or something, and then went to school at
and then
night.
went to school at night.
Oh, I see.
And I went mainly after I was married. And we had Melba. And I went to make her clothes because she was podgy, and inclined to be heavy. And I couldn't buy anything to fit her without it being made. And one of the members of the church talked me into going to night school.
Huh?
And
Okay.
I did go. And, I learned enough to, when we had twins, I made everything they wore. I knit the little undershirts and nightgowns I made, and I made everything they wore. Everything. And even pillowcases for the pram. And little covers for the pram.
Okay, let's go back now to when you were a teenager. What do you remember about your teenage years? You were still going to school?
Yes, and I...
When did you go all the way through school?
Yeah.
How old were you when you got
13.
out? 13 then, and that was the highest grade you got?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I finished in 7.
Okay.
That was the highest it went. And I finished in 7.
So you went through 7th grade.
And then, I haven't said anything about us getting married, have I?
No, talk about your teenager years for just a minute.
Well,
Keep down there.
when I was, I didn't have a good a regular boyfriend for years. I believe I was 19-year-old before I had a regular beau. You know, I used to just flirt around.
Uh-huh.
And there was one boy I went several times with, and his name was Ernest Dragg. He was a farmer, good-looking fella, and but he just was a flash in the pan. And then one day I met my beloved
Okay, well,
brother George.
let's stop there for a minute and go back and talk about George now as he was growing up. And then we'll each hear from your point of view on how you met and what happened. Okay, George, why don't you give us your name?
You know my name, don't you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's Grandpa.
Well, my name is George Hamstead. And I was born in the year 1907 on the 26th day of October. I was the 7th child to my mother had to bear out of the 11 children that she actually bore. Her name was Frances Gertrude MacDevitt. She was of Scottish descent, definitely. She was a Scot. My father's name was John Hamstead.
Okay, that's really good. And did all 11 children live?
No, 8 of the 11 children lived. I had 9 brothers and 2 sisters. No, 8 brothers and 2 sisters. One of my sisters, the youngest of the 2, only lived a matter of a few hours, actually a day and a half to be truthful. Out of my 8 brothers, 2 of them died. One at birth, he lived only 3 hours. My next brother, who died, lived until he was 5 years old. He was born in 1905 and died in 1910, I believe it was. All my other brothers have lived up until these late years. My sister, who was the firstborn of my mother, lived until she was 72. My oldest brother lived until he was 70. My next to the oldest brother, did you want the names?
It's up to you.
Well, let's go over again then. My oldest sister lived until she was 72. Her name was Catherine Hamstead. My oldest brother, Joseph Hamstead, lived until he was 70 years old. My brother Jack, next oldest to him, died when he was 71. My next oldest brother, Robert Hamstead, died January of this year, 1977, at the age of 76 and 3/4 years. My brother William Hamstead died when he was 70. I believe that was in the 1974. I have two brothers living. Peter, who is living in Deal in the city of York, in the county of Yorkshire. My youngest brother, Samuel Ephraim Hamstead, is still living in the house where I was born, at 33 Quarry Street, Rose Hill, Romarsh, Yorkshire, England.
Where's that compared to Parkgate?
That's about
Next down.
about a mile and a half north of Parkgate.
Okay. Where does this representative of the 12 or whatever fit in? Somebody over there.
He is the firstborn child of my oldest brother, Joseph Hamstead.
Oh, and what's his name?
His name is Joseph Hamstead Jr.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you, were all your people members of the church?
All of them members of the church until quite a number of years ago, when my brother William Hamstead was excommunicated because of adultery.
So who was the first one in your family to join the church?
The first one in my brothers, do you mean?
No, just
Or
your parents, your grandparents,
my parents.
your parents joined the
Yes,
church.
they joined the church, baptized into the church, July of 1908.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Now, you didn't join the church till after you were married, did you, Florence?
No.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, now, what are some of your childhood memories, George?
Oh, the most important one, and this is one that I don't think I shall ever forget, the thing that I can remember in the very early years of my life. My mother used to take us to her knee, and she'd read the scriptures to us. And I remember I was only a little over 3, around about 3.5 years old, and she taught me my first prayer. And I don't think, well, I hope not, I don't think I'll ever really forget it. The prayer was a simple prayer. Gentle Jesus, meek and mild, look upon a little child. Pity my simplicity, suffer me to come to thee. Vain I would to thee be brought. Gracious Lord, forbid it not. For in the kingdom of thy grace, give a little child a place. That was the first prayer that I ever uttered as I can remember. And I got it imprinted on my mind, and it's been there all these years.
Wished I had a memory like that. Oh dear. Okay, well, so how about the home you lived in, the friends you had as you were growing up?
Well, I was brought up in a very good home, really. I had a good mother. My father wasn't just the man that he ought to have been, but my mother must have loved him because she stayed with him right unto the end, in view of quite a lot of brutality that he imposed upon her. But she held fast to him right up unto the end, and it was because of her testimony in the gospel that she wanted to hold fast to her children, and that's the reason she stayed by my father. My father was baptized into the church the same time as my mother was baptized, both baptized on the same day. And it was approximately 9 months after their baptism, I know it was close on a year anyway, that a missionary came from America and was labouring in the Sheffield district. And that involved the nearby towns of Rotherham, of Parkgate, of Romarsh, and various other towns close by, Doncaster and Barnsley and Pontefract. And they had to labour in this part of the country where my dad lived. And at that time they was given 1 year's vacation, the missionaries. They could spend it wherever they wanted, but they couldn't come back to their own country, the America kind of thing, but because they only had 1 week. And this missionary, his name was Elder Ellsworth, I can't remember his first name, but he said, Brother John, he says, how about going with me on a vacation? And so my dad says, well, where are you going, Elder Ellsworth? He says, well, I'd like to visit the Isle of Man, which is off the east coast of England. And so my dad says, well, he says, okay, I'll go with you for a vacation for 1 week. My dad went with him. And when they got off the little boat that took them across to the Isle of Man, as they stepped onto land, Elder Ellsworth said to my dad, he says, come on, John, he said, let's go and have a drink. He didn't even address him by brother. He says, come along, John, he said, let's go and have a drink in a public house. And my dad says, I thought you wasn't supposed to go into public houses and drink. He says, well, he says, you know what they say, Brother John? He says, when you are in Rome, you do as the Romans do. And so my dad submitted to him and he went in for a drink. And that was the cause of my dad becoming inactive in the church and never receiving the priesthood. He fell away from the church. He never apostatized, he wasn't excommunicated or anything, but he fell away from the church and wouldn't have anything to do for the church. And it was through this one missionary that had done it. And that didn't just go well with my mother and dad. My dad started on the drinking habit, and for many years, up until the year 1946, 47, when he really began to slacken off. in his drinking habits, but he used to treat my mother pretty rough. Every weekend when he come home drunk, and beat my mother sometimes unmercifully.
Mm.
These are things I don't like being put on the tape, but there's one thing I do know, that truth will prevail.
Okay, well now, what about schooling and all
Well,
that kind of stuff?
schooling, I went to school at the, first of all, I started at the Romarsh Dale Road School, which is a Church of England school. And for, I should say about 3 years I went there. I started in the, they didn't have in those days kindergarten classes, you know. You start when you were 6-year-old and you go into, you call them grades here. It was class number 1. They went by the name of classes there. And I was in school there for about 3 years. And that was when I was 6 until I was about 9. And then I went to the Rose Hill School. That was not a Church of England school. It was run by the county kind of thing, same as the many schools here are run. And I stayed there for just a little over a year and went back to the Dale Road School, Church of England school, because I must have been homesick for my friends that I had there, you know, kind of thing. Wilfred Schofield and Billy Marriott and Bob Twynham and several other friends that I had who was there. And there was one occasion that I remember very well. Each year we'd have what they call a scripture examination at this school, with it being the Church of England school, and it was run by the Church of England completely. And you'd be called from your seat. You'd have to repeat various things that they'd ask you to repeat. And I was asked to repeat the catechism, the Church of England catechism. And I just boldly refused. I was only 11 years old. I boldly refused to repeat it. And they wanted to know the reason why. Mr. Sheldon, the headmaster, principal you call them here, I said, no, I'm not going to repeat it. And why aren't you going to repeat that, the catechism? Because I believe it's false. Who told you it was false? I was told by my mother. What has your mother to do with it? My mother has this much to do with it, sir. I had to call him sir, you know, the headmaster. I said, so much so that she teaches me the true gospel. What is the true gospel? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church. You are a Mormon? I said, yes, I'm a Mormon. I've been baptized into the Mormon Church. What do you believe about God? I believe that God has body, parts, and passions, that He is a living, exalted being. And that's what I've been taught by my mother. And what other things do you believe about the church? And I started repeating off some of the articles of faith that my mother had taught me. How many articles of faith do you have? 13. And Bishop Burroughs was present in this class, and he was dressed there in his robes, you know. And he said to me, do you believe all that about the Mormon Church? I said, yes, every bit of it. Because my mother's told me the church is true, I says, and I believe what my mother says more than any other person in this world. I was placed into the corner of the room, and at the close of the meeting, at the close of the class, I was brought to the headmaster, and they used to, for disobedience, they used to punish you, you know, physical punishment. And they struck me across my two hands with a cane. Florence knows what the cane was. And that represented the 13 articles of faith that I believed in. But they could not get me to say that I believe in God, the eternal Father, not one God, but three gods, and not three gods, but one God, not one God incomprehensible, but three gods incomprehensible, yet not three gods incomprehensible, but one God incomprehensible, and so on down through the catechism. I wouldn't repeat that, and I held fast to it in view of the fact that they did beat me. That's the main thing that I remember, the most important thing in my school days. And because of that and other little things, I was kept down, and I did not reach the same standard as Florence here.
Yeah,
when
but tell them why.
Yes, there was a little item that I didn't mention. I can mention it for that matter. They wanted me to spell one word, and I was a stubborn little demon. George Hamstead, spell difficulty. And I'd stand up and I'd say Mrs. D, Mrs. I, Mrs. FFI, Mrs. C, Mrs. U, Mrs. LTY. And I wouldn't say it any other way, and because I wouldn't say it any other way, I was kept down in my standards, and I finished school when I was 14 years old in Standard 5, Grade 5. I only went from 1 to 5. All the years I was in school.
Oh dear. Well, it serves
He's
you
as
right.
stubborn as an old mule.
Oh dear. Okay, well, what'd you do when you got out of school?
Well, the first thing I did, my dad didn't want me to do it, but I did it. First of all, I went to work to learn apprenticeship to a slaughterer. He was also a butcher. His name was Fred Willie. And he got me to the point in slaughtering, all right, with the beast, the cow, the bull. But he wanted me to kill a little lamb. And he told me how to get hold of this little lamb, and I had to pick the little animal up and hold its mouth with this hand like that and pull it up to my shoulder and hold that, and his throat would be here. And I had to slit the throat with a knife. And I couldn't do that because of the pictures I had seen of Jesus with lambs. And so I couldn't I couldn't stay to learn the art of butchering and slaughtering. In those days, you know, they used to slaughter cattle with the poleaxe. That's like a large pickaxe, you know, and you bring it over your head and you strike it straight and hit the cow or the bull right in the middle of the forehead there, you know. And that the point of the thing would strike through the head and go straight down to the throat of the cow. And I could do that all right. I didn't do it, but I could have done that. That didn't seem too much to me, but when it come to killing a little lamb, I couldn't do it. And so anyhow, the next thing I did, I went straight out up to the coal mine, Swallowwood pit, they called it, and I got a job, and I started there just after I was turned 14. And for 21 years until 1940, I think it was, 20 years, 1940, I worked in the coal mines.
And it was somewhere around in that time then that you met Florence.
It was, yes. I met Florence in the first week of March in 1926. I was sick at the time, and my brother Billy was very brutal to me, my brother Billy was. And I had to do everything that he told me to do. On one occasion, I'd done something that he didn't like, and I was there alone in the house with him, and my brother Jack had placed a hook in the ceiling of the living room where he hung a punch ball. You know, he was learning to do boxing, my brother Jack, and he put this hook in there, and my brother Billy on this occasion, he got a rope and he tied it onto that hook, and he got me and tied my hands behind my back, my feet together. He lifted me on the table and put the rope around my neck, and he was going to push me off the table and hang me, and he would have done. And it been for one little thing that happened. My dad come down the yard, the backyard of the house, and walked in the door just as he was putting the rope around my neck. And if he'd have been 2 minutes later, he would have hung me.
That's how you met Florence?
No, that's not how I met Florence.
No, but that's quite a child. Okay, now you say you were just about hung when you were 15, huh?
This was when I was about 15 years old. And then on this occasion, when I went out and I first met my wife, my brother Billy, he wanted me to go with him, and I was sick, and I said, no, I don't feel like going out. Oh, he says, come on. He said, I want you to go out. I want to go and get a girlfriend. Now, on this occasion, my brother Billy was married, but he wasn't living with his wife because she left him. And he wanted to find another girlfriend. And so, anyway, to save a lot of trouble and uneasiness in the home, I got ready and I went with him. And the first girl I met, when he took me, was my wife here, Emma Florence Ward. That's how I met her in the first place. But I want to tell you another thing that's really important to me. It was in 1921, and it was early in the springtime, either the month of March or April, probably May, when I was sat on the front doorstep in the early afternoon waiting for time to go to work. I've always been a guy who's been a kind of punctual. I never wanted to be tardy or late at doing anything. I've always expressed that, and she knows it. And I used to get ready for work about half an hour before time to go. And so on this occasion I went out to sit on the front doorstep. And as I was sat there on the doorstep in Quarry Street, I saw this young lady come over a little bridge kind of thing over a stream, or a creek we'll call it here. And as she come into the street, I saw her and I called my mother to the door. I said, Mother, I says, come here. And she come. I said, you see this young lady coming down the street? She says, yes. I said, well, that young lady is going to be my wife. Now, this was in 1921. It was early in the spring, as I said. It was 1926, exactly 5 years later, when I went out with my brother Billy, and the girl I met was this same girl that I saw coming down the street 5 years previous. Now, if you can tell me how I knew that she was to be my wife, other than it being a memory that's been with me from the pre-existent state, then everything will be all right.
Did you know anything about that, Florence? He just saw you. He didn't say anything, huh?
No,
Not at that time, no.
So you didn't
not
see
till-
him and know what happened then, huh?
no,
Not till, I didn't see him till after this. Oh, good many years. I couldn't tell you how many.
5
but,
years exactly.
When I did see him, we were coming out at movies, and I had a girlfriend, Audrey Roper, and Mondays was my half day where I worked off, and she says to me, "Oh, come on, let's go to movies at Romarsh or something." So we went up to the Romarsh movies, and I'm coming out. You know, when you're tired after you've been working, you kind of get pins and needles in your feet. And of course I was wearing high heels, and they're not restful to your feet by any means. When we're coming out of the movies, I bumped in, Audrey had taken my attention to somebody in the street when we got outside, and I went looking back and walked straight into George's brother Billy. And of course I didn't pay any attention, and we got so far up the road we were going to visit a cousin of mine that lived up there. And Billy started whistling, and Audrey turned around. She says, "Hey," she says, "let's talk to these fellas and have a bit of fun." So I said, "Oh, I don't want to talk to them." But the reason was Audrey's brother was interested in me. I was going with Audrey, but we used to play cards and things around their table, and he used to take me home when we used to play. And he wanted to court me, and I went in one night and they'd been quarrelling, and it was because he wanted to court me, and it would leave Audrey without a friend. She'd been engaged before, but she'd given the fellow up because she would have to live with his mother. She was a widow, and the mother didn't like Audrey, and Audrey didn't like the mother. So she gave this man his ring back, which left her free again. So if I went with her brother, it would leave her alone again. Neither a boyfriend nor a girlfriend. So in order to keep peace in the household, I kept going with Audrey. And then I met my beloved here.
Well, what did you do? Did you turn around and talk to him that night after Billy whistled?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Billy waved for us to go to them, and I said no.
We had to go.
I
to
shook
them.
my head. I said, "You come here," which of course they did. And we stood and talked, and then this thunderstorm blew up. And so we had to run for a shelter. And they were going home, and we were going up to my cousin's, as I said before. So Billy says, we'll see you Saturday night. Where? So I said, down by the Park Gate post office. So all week long, Audrey kept saying, I wonder if those Hamstead boys will turn up. So I said, no, they won't. And so came round to Saturday night, and she said, are you going to see if the Hamstead boys turn up? So I said, no. I says, they won't turn up. She says, well, let's just go and look. Well, across from the post office was this green grocery store, and they used to put their apples and everything outside under a awning that they pulled down over from the window, you know, when it was hot weather. Anyway, she says, let's have a walk down and see if they've turned up. So I said, oh, I don't want. I says, I'm not bothered about going with them. So anyway, to satisfy Audrey, I went. And she says, they're there. She says, they stood across there. And I got mingled in all this crowd of people shopping around this fruit stall. And I walked through all crowd, and I started to walk round what we call School Lane. And I was walking down that way, and she turned round. She says, they've seen us. She says, they're coming running. So they caught up to us, and Billy says, come on, let's catch this tram car. So I says, oh, I'm not going. He says, why? I says, I don't want to go to town. So he says, well, where do you want to go then? So I didn't know what to say, so I said, well, we'll go to Romarsh Movies. And so he said, well, let's catch a bus and go in opposite direction. I said, no, I'm going to walk. So anyway, he says, well, which way are you going? I said, round School Lane and up by the duck pond. And then my mind began to work. There's no houses around there, only backs of these rich people's houses. And they all had high gates, you know, and walls. So I thought, oh no, we shouldn't go up there. So I turned completely around and walked all through Thoroughfare. All these people shopping Saturday night. And we walked up to Romarsh Movies. And the first house hadn't come out yet. There was just a little line. And so we were stood there, and George left and went across to the candy store. And I could have cried, really, for his thoughtfulness. He went and, you know, in those days, Thorne's toffees were a select candy. They were all individually wrapped, you know, and everything. And she put them in a sack that were drawn up, you know, first into that paper you can see through, only were in bag shape. Mm. And then they put them into this little bag tied up with ribbon. And he came out with this candy tied up with, I think it was pink ribbon in its little bag. And when he gave me this bag, I thought, well, a complete stranger to do a thing like that, he must be a nice boy. And we went into movies, and he never tried to hold my hand or anything. He just sat there. And you know, the way he acted pleased me. And, you know, I thought, well, he must be a nice boy. And then Billy, when we came out at movies, started making excuses as soon as ever we got outside. And I knew what was coming. He didn't want to see Audrey anymore. So I thought, well, bang goes that. Shan't see George anymore. And they both walked me home to my gate. And I was leaving. Just said goodnight and I was leaving. And he says, do you ever go up to the park? So I says, yes, we go every Sunday night. It was summertime, and listen to the band. He says, well, I'll see you tomorrow night outside the Rose Hill entrance. Sure enough, at Sunday night he was there. And he took both Audrey and I, walked round Greensboro Tops. And she went with us for 4 weeks, wasn't it, George? 4 or 6 weeks.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And she finally caught on that I liked George enough that I wanted to go with him regularly. So this, it'll be 4th or 5th Sunday. She says, if George Hamstead turns up tonight, she says, I shall come home. And in my own mind I thought, well, I shall be pleased if you do. And but I didn't say it. And of course that's when George and I went round Greensboro Tops, and that's the first time he kissed me. We stood for a minute or two by a gate, light night, you know, summertime. And he kissed me. And we've been going together 6 weeks then. And that's when our romance started, and we courted, how long, George, before we were married?
2 3/4 years.
And he never said anything, but of course I was as green as grass. And I used to tell him all things that Emily Brown used to say down, which I can't repeat, down cellar when we were, you know, I worked at a fish and chip place, and we used to have to go down there to, you know, cut the fins off the fish, and then open them up and take the bone out, ready for Mrs. Topham to cut them into pieces for frying.
So you were working at a fish and chip place then?
Mm-hmm.
No, we never did find out what you did after you got out of school, really. Did you go to work right away?
I stayed home. I used to work for a cousin of mine that had 3 children, and I used to go up and help her for so many days a week.
Okay, and then after you were, what, 16 or something, you started to work for this?
Yeah, fish and chip shop. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how old were you two then when you started courting then?
No, I was older than that. I must have worked there longer than that too, because I was 19 when I met George.
You was 18 when you met me, sweetheart.
Well, I thought, is it from 19?
1 year.
And anyway, we courted 4.5 years, wasn't it?
No, 2 3/4 years.
Well, I thought it was 4.5.
No, 2 3/4 years we courted. We met in March of 1926. We married on the 24th of December 1928. Now reckon it up.
But
2 3/4 years.
I knew he was a good man, and the Lord must have been with us, and I believe every word that he says, that we knew each other before we came to this earth. Because we've never regretted being married, and we've never been sorry that we did it, have we?
No,
How long was it after you were married that you joined the church?
3.
3 years.
Do you remember anything particular? How did that come about?
What?
That you joined the church?
I joined the church because my husband was a member,
Okay.
and I didn't want it to be a divided house. And another thing, I used to go to church with him. He took me to church. There was no branch in Romarsh at that time, so he took me to Sheffield, to conferences and things in the beginning. And then they started Romarsh branch up again. And that's how I met Brother and Sister Quinny and the Holton family and whatnot. And I used to go to church.
but you didn't tell what you said when Melba was born, did you?
What did I say?
Well, when Melba was born, she was, it was on the Sabbath day that she was in strong labour,
Oh, yeah.
very strong labour, although Melba
And he went and
wasn't
left
born
me.
until round about early morning, anyway, of Monday morning. And I went to Sunday school. We had our priesthood meeting. We went
You're
to Sunday.
superintendent. At
Yes,
Sunday
I went to
school.
Sunday school, and she says to her mother, she says, "You watch." She says, "I bet he'll go to sacrament meeting even though I'm having these pains like I'm having."
I'd been in labour a week.
So I went to Sunday school, and I come home, and she was in real pain, and it come to time to go to sacrament meeting at 6 o'clock. She says, "Aren't you going to sacrament meeting?" Because I wasn't making any headway to go. I says, "No, I don't think I'm going to go this time, honey. I'm going to have a day off." And it was because of the pains constant pains that she was having, and I'd be there ready to get the doctor, you know. I was only a short way away from where the doctor had his office and everything. And I said to her mother, I says, "You know, Mama," I says, "I think I've been inspired," I says, "not to go to sacrament meeting tonight."
He didn't tell you I'd been in labour a week.
Oh dear. So Melba was born.
She was born in the early hours of Monday morning, the following day.
And you never saw such a beautiful baby in your life. Oh, she was gorgeous. She was pink all over. It was pink, and I was as proud as Punch. She really was beautiful. And
Are you tired, Lou?
we were going to call her Evelyn. That was going to be a name. So George's mother asked me as a favour, would I put Mary into a name, as that was her mother's name. So I said yes. So we called her Evelyn Mary.
And then this
No, we didn't. No,
No, we called them.
that were, we chose Evelyn Mary.
That's right. And then
And
all
then I
day,
had a favourite missionary. And him and his companion came to see me. And Amala really was a gorgeous baby. And he were talking about his sisters. And I'd already chosen this name, Evelyn Mary, and his mother were really thrilled, you know, that I was going to put Mary into a name. And Elder Reed came to see baby and me. And he were talking about his sisters. And he said he had a sister Melva. They called her Melva Mary. And a sister, what was the sister's name?
I don't know.
Anyway, he had another sister and he told me her name. And George's mother came down. I told her I was going to call her Melva. She says, are you going to put Mary in? So I said, yes. I said, I'll call her Melva Mary. And he didn't tell me about Melva Mary, it was Melva. And then when I went to church to have her blessed, he said, do you know, Sister Hamstead, that's my sister's full name, Melva Mary.
I could have got to know his sister's name the other day. You know, Molly Christensen, who I went to see.
Yeah, well, you knew that
Well,
because...
no, Molly Christensen's wife, who I saw the other day, is the other sister to Lucy and Reed. It's Melva Mary Reed's sister. Molly Christensen's wife. And I saw her the other day when I took that book over to Molly Christensen.
It's a small world, huh?
Yeah, they're living here now. You know,
Okay,
But
well now,
we've had a wonderful life together.
well, now what was you going to say?
well, I was just thinking if we could kind of go over some of the highlights of your married life. You had Melva, and then Marlene
Yeah,
came along. When was that?
that
5 years later.
came along in 1934, August the 29th, when she was born.
And you were still working at the mines,
I
is
was
that right?
still working in the mines at that particular time.
And you guys had your own home? Had you moved into a home? Were you living in
Yes.
an apartment? What
No,
were you
we
doing?
was living in our own home, although we rented it. It wasn't our own property.
We did when Marlene was born, but we lived with my parents for the first 4.5 years.
Yes, and then we went to live
Because you couldn't get a home then
Yeah.
on account of the overpopulated thing after the war, you know.
Yeah.
And we lived with them for 4.5 years. And then we got Mary Bagnall's little place, didn't we?
yes, in Netherfield
And
Inn.
we lived there for just over a year. And his sister lived in this house that we left to come to this country. And she moved into a larger place because he were a widow and had a large family, and she couldn't have any children. And she'd always had a maid to do her washing and everything.
Mm.
And she met this fella and went with him and took to all his kids and reared them.
Oh boy. But you guys ended up moving into the place she had.
Yeah.
And we lived
And,
in there for about...
We stayed there till we came to this country.
Okay, and in the meantime then, Marlene's been born, right?
Yeah.
She lived for how long?
She lived for 17 months. She died January the 18th, 1936.
And she started with a cold. He went up to my mother's, it were Friday. And he'd been doing some cobbling. And shoes, you know. And we got our house cleaned all the way through to the living room, and he went up to mother's and I said, take Marlene with you, because I was doing cellar steps. And she was leaning, you know, like babies do. And I said, take Marlene with you. I said, now come up after I've done this. I said, I don't want you to fall down these steps, because they were all stone steps, see, down into the cellar. So I took her up there, and I'd got bread raising in bowl, you know. So I went up to my mother's. We lived in the middle of the street, and my mother lived at the top, where I was born, in the house where I was born. And she'd gone to sleep, and all her face was flushed when I went up there. And my mother says, this child's running a temperature. She said, when you go down home, you want to get a fire upstairs and keep her warm. So that was the first thing we did when we went home. She came down with us, and she held Marlene while he made a fire upstairs, and I rolled me bread into loaves, got that done. And she just slept and slept and didn't wake up, and I said to George, I don't like this a bit. And she opened her eyes, and she never asked for a drink. And she opened her eyes and she said, Jink, Jink. So I says to George, I says, that's the first time she's said that. And he went and got her some water, you know, cold water. Well, when I saw how flushed she was, I was worried. And I didn't know what to do, because it was 9:30 at night. And it had snowed, you know, and we were on a hill, and it was all like ice, dangerous. So I said, I don't like the look of this child. And he says, well, make your mind up. He says, it's 9:30 now, I'll have to go and fetch doctor. And I said, well, I'd be more satisfied if I had a doctor's opinion. So he went down, and the doctor came back with him. And he said to poultice, and he says, I'll take George back and I'll give him medication after surgery. So he took George back with him, and he sent kaolin poultices. And he sent some pills that we had to give her every 4 hours, weren't it, George?
Something like that, I can't remember.
Mm-hmm. And you know, Charles, I slept with her in my arms all night. I had her in my arms all night. And she never hardly woke up. No trouble at all. And next morning I got up and I washed the little bottom and didn't bathe her. And changed all her clothes. Put another poultice on, fresh poultice back and front. And I don't know what happened, whether it putting those poultices on, but she went into convulsions. And I just grabbed her up and I screamed and I says, "She's dying, Mother." I says, "My baby's dying." She says, "She's not." She says, "Lie down in bed." I'll never forget it. I laid her down in bed and she laid there and she went a bit of trouble. She never cried, nothing. And my mother and father came to sit with her while she would had a couple living in sitting room and other bedroom. And we were getting that straight. And now we were down to the living room and we got place all done through. And he was blackleading, I shall never forget it. He blacklead all over his face where he blacklead a stove and kept wiping his face. And she went into this convulsion and I grabbed her up. I said, "Oh, Mother, she's dying." She said, "Don't be so silly, she isn't." I said, "She is." And she said, "Lay her back in bed." And we laid her back in bed. And then she started druckling in her throat. And I were ignorant. I didn't know what it was. And we got place put straight downstairs and it was around between 2 and 4. And I went upstairs to get some clean clothes and she looked at me and the doctor told me to cover the light up so that it didn't shine in her eyes. And I was coming around bed and George's mother had come down and taken over. And my mother had just gone home to have a hot drink and buy something to eat. And I walked around the bedroom and she came conscious just for a few minutes. And I said, George's mother said to me, "Florrie, she's looking at you. She's watched you all around the bedroom." And I went and I got on the bed beside her. And as I say, I were ignorant. But it was just before the end. And she stopped ruckling. And I says, "Oh, you've stopped making that noise."
It's not running.
So I said, "Mama's going to take a bath and then I'll be right back and I'll hold you." And she just looked at me. And I walked out and her eyes followed me to the door. And that was it. I never saw her again alive.
You went and took the bath, came back and she was
And
gone.
I heard
She died at 5 minutes to 4.
he was up
Exactly.
with his mother and I heard this thud. And he looked at her and I said to his mother, "She's gone, isn't your mother?" She says, "Yes." And he fainted, dead away. And came down. I was dressed. And the top and she was gone. I just went to hysterics. His mother smacked my face.
Each time we were going to bed, she's licked.
And that were it. And then
She's pooped. How long has the tape got to go yet?
About 5 minutes.
we were in the house alone, and neither one of us could rest, and she were downstairs. We went down. By this time she were in a little casket. And I said to George, I said, if you don't get up with me, I'm sure I shall go crazy. You know, I couldn't relax, couldn't go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And snow were melting, you know, and making eerie noises, and it were a big house. I said, if you don't get up with me, I said, I'm sure I shall go crazy. So we went downstairs, and we knelt beside her on the couch, and he offered up a prayer. And I was given the strength to part with her.
Gee, that's neat.
And I went to graveside and sang on my father. And what was that other song? Sometime, not now, but in the coming years, it may be in the better land. We'll read the meaning of our tears. Someday we'll understand.
Okay, and then what, for about, what, you had your accident in 1940?
Yes, I had an accident in 1940, but I honestly believe that accident was a blessing.
Turned out to be a blessing.
And the mine caved in?
Yes. That was on January the 10th, 1940. I was working on the night shift, and it was round about 2 o'clock in the morning. There was a coal cutting machine coming down the coal face, cutting a gap underneath the seam of coal as it could be blasted out. And I was working in the roadway towards the coal face, making it high enough for people to walk, because the seam of coal was only 4 feet thick. And in order to work on the coal face, you had to be on your hands and knees all the time. You couldn't stand up. And I was working on the night shift, breaking the roof down with a friend of mine who worked with me, and making it high enough for people to walk towards the coal face. And this coal cutting machine was coming down, and the vibration was roughly round the vibration of 3 motorbikes revving up at one time. So you can tell what vibration it was. And it started and it shook the roof kind of thing, and I had a wooden prop, we called them. It was a support round about 8 or 9 inches diameter, and roughly round about 6 feet tall. And it was under the strata, and there was a big gap run up the strata. They call them breaks in the strata there, and there was a lot of loose dirt or debris in this break, and with the vibration of the machine, it caused that to come down and drop me to the floor and started covering me up. And then this support gave way, and the lump of stone fell and hit me on the 4th lumbar of the spine, and it fractured my spine completely and severed the pelvis from the spine. But with the support falling over, it fell over me like that, and it left a gap as I could breathe air. And I was underneath that for about an hour and a half, and it
Took
took
14
14 men
to dig him out.
to dig me out, to get me out, and it took them an hour and a half to do it. And when they got me to the hospital, they found out that my spine was fractured, and I was done for as far as walking was concerned. I was paralysed for 2.5 young years before I began to walk again. But I always say it was a blessing for one thing. Mama knows it's the truth, that she was bitter against the Lord for taking Marlene. She was awfully bitter, and I wanted her to have another little baby, and she wouldn't submit to it. And none of our children that's been born has been mistakes. It's been a decided thing between me and Mama all the time. And she didn't want another baby. And it went on from 1936 till January the 10th of 1940. No, I made a mistake there, not till January the 10th of 1940, but until about 10 to 12 months previous to that time, around 1939, and then she felt that she wanted a baby.
Oh, you had already had this accident then?
No, this was before the accident, when you wanted a baby, and we tried to get a baby, if you remember, and we couldn't. And she asked prayer after prayer after prayer, and it seemed as if it wasn't going to come. And then I met with the accident, and the doctors stated that I'd never have any more children, because when I was buried under this fall of roof, I had my electric lamp, which was fed by a battery. I had it hung on my belt, and on the handle of the lamp was a metal lamp hook, a loose one, as we could stick it into the wooden props, and it'd stand there so that we could use both hands and it'd give us light. This metal lamp hook that was loose on the handle penetrated my testicles, and the doctor said that we'd never have any more children. In 1943, November the 5th, we had you and Andre, Carol and Andre, born, twins. And I say that that accident was a blessing in one way anyway. It was a blessing in disguise, because I think that was the cause of you being born into this world, was to make Mommy and I, for that matter, fully understand. Now you've put the other side on.
New tape.
Oh.
Yeah, I know it's getting late and everything, but it seems to me that I remember one of you telling me a story one time about when you went out to get a job or something, and you were on crutches.
No, this were after the twins were born. We were
Okay,
off
now
work.
was he
We were
in a
accidents.
wheelchair or something for?
No, he
No.
was in a wheelchair for months.
Oh, for quite a
And
long time.
then they kept taking him in hospital and doing things, because they were nearly all nerves. They were delicate
Why don't you go and
operations.
lay down, sweetheart?
I'm fine.
And they operated on him. Weren't you upside down on operating table?
That was the last 9 months of it. Yeah.
And he had several operations, and they cut all, oh, it did look peculiar. Made it like a beehive in the back here. Shaved his head and bared all his spine right at the top of his skull here. And when he were, he'd had this operation, they touched his toe and they got a flicker of life in his toe. And he patted him and he says, "You're going to walk." For a long time before he did. But eventually he did walk.
Okay, well, what was this thing then about somebody or other seeing a sign or something in a storefront or something? You were on crutches and you put the crutches down and never used them or something? Or am I getting something mixed up with somebody
You
else?
going for applying for a job and they didn't hire.
He were going with a cane, not crutches. He'd gotten to a
It was
cane.
No,
And this were much, much later, after twins were born. And a fella called Harry Cheetham, he looked kind of like a sissy, and everybody used to make fun of him. But he had a good job. And he came to Snow's across the road from us, members of church. And they went home. So I came to our house to see George. And he were talking, and he asked George how he was, and he says, "Well, I'm much better than I have been." He said, "I'm going now with a cane." And he said, "What I'd like is a job." So he said, "Brother Hamstead," he says, "what's your writing like?" So George gave him a sample of his writing. And he says, "I'll give you a note." He says, "And you go down to Sheffield Corporation and see them tomorrow and you'll get a job straight away." And he did. And it was the best job he ever had in his life. And then
So no, what was the deal now? You got up to the front of the store and there was a sign there or something?
No, he went to work there. And he were on with this stick.
no,
And he thought he'd better try and walk without it, because he was afraid he might lose his job.
Yeah.
So he threw the cane away.
But he'd already gotten the job.
Yeah,
no.
yeah. But he was afraid of losing it. See, with going with a cane. I don't know whether he went in without the cane when he went but anyway, he'd got this fear that if he kept going with this cane, they might.
I got the fear that if I went into the corporation to see Mr. Prince, that he wouldn't give me the job walking with a cane. And I didn't want to tell him about the accident. That's what it was. I was limping, no doubt about that. But it wasn't really bad. And I threw the cane downside of the wall of the building outside and went into the office to see this Mr. Prince. And he asked various questions and this, that and the other. And then I answered him to the best of my ability. He wanted to know what my health was and this, that, the other, and where I'd worked previously and how long I'd worked there. And I gave him the answer. He says, and told me what the job was, that I'd have to go around all the meters in the control room, take the numbers from the meters and subtract it from the previous meter reading read 1 hour previous to see how much electricity had been used at that particular hour, you see. And I did all this work. It was a clerical kind of a job. I was constantly working on with a pen and paper all the time, pen and a book. And
But you did need to be able to walk around and...
I had to walk around the room. And when I come out, I picked my stick up and got onto the tram car and went home. But when I went to do the job, when I got to know that I got the job, I got to know through Harry Cheetham that the job was mine and I had to go. And when I went without my cane. And I never used it after that.
There's sure no trace of a limp anymore, is there?
Well, no, there's no trace of limp now.
But he's
There was
he's
for
got
several months.
evidence that doing job in papers that you got from there, haven't
Oh,
you?
yes, I've got that.
Somewhere at home.
Recommends from Mr. Mills.
To bring out here with him.
Yeah,
With a letter from a man called Leicester.
oh, yes,
that,
but there's references
Yes, I know they
to
are.
get work here.
But he gave him a wonderful reference. And he was an accountant. And
Was this the job he had when you guys came?
Yeah,
Yes,
this is the
States?
job he
Yeah.
left. Yeah.
that's the job I left.
Best job he ever had in his life. White collar, and he wore a white jacket like a doctor, and a black tie. Best job he ever had. Most money. And then we came to America and left it.
And what was the name of the company you were working for?
Sheffield Corporation, Electric Corporation.
Oh.
Sheffield Electric Corporation.
And he was
They
respected.
supplied all the electricity for Sheffield, for the city of
You
Sheffield.
would never have known he was a coal miner.
Okay, well now, tell us about the war years in England.
Oh, we were only young then, but ain't First World War anyway.
Yeah, when you were, 1914, you guys would have only been
Somewhere
7
around
years old.
7, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm thinking about World War II. You were married and you had the
yeah.
children.
War was still on when these were born.
That's
And we
right.
had to stay upstairs. We couldn't go in an air raid shelter or anything. We were on the top floor. And we couldn't move them out of bedroom.
Well, they were born right there in Parkgate or
Yeah,
Belmarsh or
yeah.
somewhere, weren't they?
And they were only 4 pounds and 4.5.
She was 4 pounds and Andre was 4.5 pounds.
Andre was just about dead when he was born.
I thought it was Carol. I thought
No.
one of them had their cord wrapped around the
That
neck.
was Carol.
That was Carol.
But my
That cord around the neck.
mother released it. As she come out of the womb, my mother said, "Oh," she says, "the cord's round her neck. She'll choke if we don't get her released." And she got her finger inside there around her throat and released the cord. How she did it, I don't know. But she'd had 11 children, so she knew what to do.
Well, she'd been with
And
lots
she'd
of
been-
other women that had given birth, you know.
She'd been with midwives and things like that, so she knew what she was doing. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But Andre was the one that was really in bad shape. Huh?
Yes, he was black and blue all over them.
Oh, he was blue.
I never thought
as
he'd have
blue. No, we didn't expect him living.
He was more
Doctor
difficult
used
to
to come
feed
every
than
day.
she was. I used to just open the lips like that with my thumb and finger and have this fountain pen dropper and just drop the food in, close the lips and do it. I was feeding every hour like that for several weeks. Whilst there
Night
was,
and day, that went on.
there was wrapped in, you call it cotton here, we call it cotton wool in England. There was completely wrapped in that. And
If you'd have seen them,
we
this is how
couldn't
they
change
looked.
them or anything, you know. The
The
nurse had to come and do
the
that.
little hands and arms. I'd made everything they wore. I'd sewn and knitted,
Yeah.
even to pram covers. and things
Of course,
like
you didn't
that.
know you were going to have twins, did you?
No,
Oh, no.
no.
That came as a surprise.
They were 7 months. She had no fingernails and no toenails when she was
Nurse
born.
came one morning and she says, Mrs. Hamstead, she says, I haven't been able to sleep all night, she says, for worrying about you. I said, what for?
You
She
couldn't-
says, well, she says, I don't know, you've got this wardrobe together as you've got. She says it's equal to any rich man's. She says, I've seen people with money not have wardrobes like you've got for these babies. I said, well, in the first place, I said, I've made everything myself. And I says, I'll let you into a little secret. I said, this is another little story, separate story. I said, my husband was on his way up to his mother's and he waiting to catch a bus. This was when he was on his feet and going with a cane. And I said, this woman had sent a girl to cobblers to have these shoes soled and heeled. And she wanted them for 6 o'clock that night. And she couldn't get them done. And he was waiting for the bus like she was. So she brought these shoes back and told her mother that she couldn't get them done. So he says, Mrs., he says, if you let me have them shoes, he says, I'll have them you done for 6 o'clock tonight. Talk about not managing, you can always find a way. We have.
Yeah.
And if you
He
take...
earned the money that you could make all those clothes from.
Yeah. And it all went into a separate pot.
And he did a little side work of cobbling, huh?
Uh-huh. And we were independent, with me being able to sew and whatnot. I made them the most beautiful little gowns you ever did see. And I put little things through so that I could thread ribbons. And when they were preemie babies, the little hands were inside these ribbons and they were drawn up the sleeves. So that's how they were. Just like a little Eskimo doll, you know. You just see the face and that's all you could see. Brown bonnet. And they were that fair you couldn't see hair or anything. They were so fair. And Andre, he was as blue. We didn't expect him living. And nurse, when he was being born, she says, oh my goodness, he were coming, doubled. And she says, this is going to be hard. And I said, well, I don't mind so long as they live. I says, that's going to be your worry if they don't live. I said, if they don't live, I says, there's no, I felt as though everything had be gone. But every morning, Charlie, the first thing I did, when I'd got some clothes on my back, because it was cold, upstairs, I'd kneel down at a chair in front of the window. And I asked the Lord to bless me. And that He would grant us a child. And, everything would be all right. And He sent us two. Sent us a little boy and a little girl.
Well, now,
And when Andre was born, she says, well, bless your little heart, you've been a gentleman. You stayed to let ladies come first.
I'm still curious about the war years. Did you ever get bombed on?
Yeah.
Or were you even close to it? Or
Yeah, because the guns were right on Greensboro tops. You remember me telling you about us going when we were courting round these tops?
Yeah.
Well, that's where the guns were placed, because they rose above this town. And so on moonlight nights, we always used to expect it. Moonlight nights, you'd think it would be the darkest night, but it was moonlight that we were afraid of more than anything, because that's when they used to
And they would bomb
Yeah.
Raw Marsh and
no,
Hartgate, or Sheffield.
Sheffield was bombed, and there were certain places in Rotherham that was bombed. But that was only around about 6 or 7 miles north of Sheffield.
It ran 2 miles from
Parkgate to
Rotherham.
yes. But we didn't actually get the bomb.
We saw planes fight in the
Oh,
sky.
yes.
They used to, you could see them fighting each other in the sky on moonlight nights.
There wasn't.
And the guns would go off. And
Yes. There wasn't any destruction.
And you were asked if you were on the street to get in shelter anywhere. And I know I came home from Relief Society one night, and I kept having to run into passages for shelter, because I wanted to get home.
Because of the
Them
dive
people there.
bombers, there were dive bombers and used to be coming over. But we never got the real bombing.
But I never went out into shelter.
The industrial
wouldn't go
places, it was the industrial cities that got the bombing. Coventry, that really got it. And London and all those places, Birmingham.
We'd
Nottingham.
just about getting out on a Sunday night. We started having our sacrament meeting in afternoon in winter weather. And we'd just getting out when air raid sirens went.
Air raid sirens used to be going at least 5 times a week.
We used to have snow. Snows would be at our front door before air raid siren had finished blowing from across road.
And
She was scared to death.
We'd got an air raid shelter in the yard, and that's what they come over for, to go into air raid shelter. And Mother here, she wouldn't go into air raid shelter. I wanted to go in.
We'd struggled and worked and got that home together, and we had a nice home. And I thought, well, you goes, if home goes up, I'm going up with it. And
you talk about him being stubborn.
Well, I were warm. I didn't shiver and shake.
No.
And I used to pull the couch up to the fire.
Sit there waiting for a bomb to come down.
And table up to... No, I used to eat.
That's even worse yet. She's sitting there all cozy and warm in front of the fireplace eating her dinner.
I did, it's
and
true.
the bombs are all falling around. If the house goes, I'm going too.
We had this big trifle. We used to have a dish, and I'd make this trifle when we could get stuff. And all this Sunday night, air raid siren
You'll not
went.
be fit for driving tomorrow.
Oh, be quiet, George. This is more important.
And we just got in, and buzzer went, and I said to George, go and fetch my mother and father down, and I'll put kettle on. They all went down into the cellar, and he says, are you coming? I says, no. I says, if there's a bomb to this place, I says, I'm going with it. I'm not scratching and scraping for another home, and I didn't. I sat there with table in front of the fire and I ate. My dad had come up, why don't you come down here? I said, I'm not coming down there. And then he'd come up, why don't you come down? I said, no, I'm not coming down there. I said, if the bomb place, the bomb me. He says, well, you've at least a chance down there. He says, you've no chance here. See, we had a arched cellar roof, and it'd take, you know, a really direct hit to get you through that kind of a roof.
And so when the war was over with, it was only it was in 45, wasn't it?
Yes,
that you guys came over here to the States.
45. We
Went
came
long
over here
after
in
war.
48.
There was still rationing, just as heavy as what
48.
we got 2 ounces. Was it 2 ounces of bacon per person?
Per person per week.
Well, so what made you decide to come to the States then?
Well, you want to know what made us come to the States? I'll tell you.
No temple in England.
No, that wasn't the reason we come to the States either. I mean, if it had been that, we could have stayed until there was one built, and there was one built afterwards. But the reason we come, it was in March of 1948, March the 13th to be exact, that Melba and George decided to get married. And I got permission from Salvoy J. Boyer, the president of the British Mission at the time, being a member of the branch presidency of the Sheffield branch. I got permission to be able to marry them, perform the ceremony. And I performed that ceremony. And 2 weeks later, George and Melva went on their honeymoon, and their honeymoon was spent on the Atlantic Ocean. They come to this country because his mother and father was here. Well, as soon as ever Melva left the country, or the chicken left the nest, the old rooster started worrying about her. I'm not going to see her no more. Or am I going to see her anymore, I says. And the following week I went down to Sheffield and I went to the travel agency and asked for if I could have a ticket on a boat to come to this country. And it was exactly 9 months later, March to November. The end of November,
we were here in December.
when I got this boat was sailing on the 28th of November of 1948. The boat was called the Battery.
SS Battery.
SS Battery, that's right. And it arrived in New York on December the 6th, 1948. And that was the reason I come to this country, because the little chicken had left. And I wanted to be with the chicken. I know I got her, the older chicken, but that wasn't sufficient. I wanted the younger chickens. And I had 2 chickens to bring with me too, Carol and Andre. They were exactly 5 years old.
They had the 5th birthday on the 5th of November.
And we set sail on the 28th of November of that year.
And that year, I think they had every disease that was imaginable.
They had measles,
Scarlet
mumps,
fever.
Scarlet fever, what last when they had them in the hospital.
She used to keep getting in and out of bed, she said. And that's Panker. getting out of bed.
Stubborn, just like her mother, huh?
So,
And our Andre would be there, and he'd stand at window and his head would be down and he'd be looking up like this. You couldn't go inside, you know, you looked at him through a window.
our little Carol's going to have no sleep.
And he'd stand there and I'd say, are you all right? And I'd say, yeah. But I'll be glad when I come home.
I'm worried about
I'd
her.
explain to him that they'd have to stay there for a certain time, and of course they knew the days, and Andrew coming home on a Wednesday, and I said to him when he were coming home, you know Mummy's wash day, don't you? And he says, yes. I said, well, on Mummy's wash day next week, you're coming home. And when he come home, he used to ask if he could go to the bathroom. And we'd be sat around the table at mealtime. And the bathroom were across the yard. And he'd go and sit there and sit there and sit there. And I said, Andre, what are you doing? And he says, can I come? I said, of course you can come. And evidently he'd have to sit on the potty until they give him permission to come out. And he used to fold his pyjamas up and put them away when he come out of hospital. And he insisted that he have his own cup. Yeah, he didn't have to bring any germs home that drilled into him. And then as he come out, she went in. So that were a double dose.
Okay, well now you came down from New York to Washington, D.C., because that's where George and Melva were, right?
That's right.
You lived in an apartment house for a while.
Yes, on Calorama Road.
And then you moved out to...
1640.
Yes.
And then you moved out to Silver Spring, Maryland, right?
Yes, we moved out
We went
to
out
Veers
to-
Mill, Silver Springs, Maryland, on the 3rd of July, 1953.
We went out, it were a national holiday, and we went into the park, and Melva and George bought a newspaper. And they were looking through it at houses. We wanted to get into a home. And we loaned George's sister and her husband the money to come over to get the money out of the country. And we told them they could pay us back when when they got on the feet. I don't think they ever would have given it to us if we hadn't asked for it. And they were riding taxis here and taxis there, and we were scratching and scraping, and so we Melva were looking through, and she says, there's a house here. And it were empty, and it were one of those Veers Mill where you used to come to pick Carol up.
Now what was the road there?
Veers Mill Village.
Oh, that was the Dewey
Road.
Dewey Road. Okay. And that was the one with the big stairs
Yeah.
where
That
I
was the
first dated
first-
Carol.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the first house we ever had in America. We were in an apartment up to that time.
So this would have been about the time that I met Carol then.
Yeah.
It's to posterity.
And then
Okay,
it's
and then
bedtime.
it'll be bedtime. Yeah, we'll have 2.5 hours worth.
Anyway,
Now, what was it you just said before we got cut off? Now, Florence.
it's gone.
Why are you asking all
What was such a
questions?
nice statement, Ken? She said, "Come on, remember. I always
I always liked Charlie
There
Beede.
you go.
And we sang in choir, and we always used to have a lot of fun. Can't you remember? Joking back and forth. You and Melvin Laney.
Yeah.
And we were about only three. There weren't four of us then, were there?
Yeah.
Well, there was with me and you. But we always used to have a lot of fun, didn't we, back and forth. And I used to talk to Cal, and you see, I like Charlie Beede. Beede, I bet he'd make a good husband. And then, of course, as time went on, you started paying attention to her. You wound up being man and wife.
And then we were pestered with Kenneth Beede.
Oh dear. So you lived in Dewey Road for a while, and then you moved up to
Furman Road.
Furman Road, huh? And that's when Carol and I got married.
Yeah.
And then you moved into a little apartment.
When we retired.
Yeah. Yeah,
Just
'cause
before we retired.
George and you had been custodians of the new stake center out there.
Yeah.
hadn't you?
Yeah.
It was in October of 1961 when we bought the house in Furman Road, 506 Furman Road,
4506.
4506, that's right, Furman Road. And it was in 1968, August the 1st, that we moved into Greenery Lane, right? And then in September of 1974, we moved into the
Kensington.
House. And following that, we left the Kensington House to come out west in December of 1975. That's right up, and we live now in Orem.
What's the address there?
The address is 1436 South, 320 East, Orem.
Okay. Well, now you guys, as you look back over your lives, are there any special spiritual experiences that you've had that you haven't mentioned that you'd like to bring up? And then we'd like to have you tell us.
You're going to keep us up all night.
No, we only got another 20 minutes on the tape, and this is it. Okay.
Well, there was a special occasion.
Well, you tell it.
Andre met an Indian girl, and he asked if he could bring her home. And he brought her home eventually. He brought her home at Christmas time. And she went to, I couldn't put her upstairs because, there were no locks on the doors. And there were just 2 bedrooms up there. So we went up there and put her in our bedroom. And she came out next morning in a brand new robe I'd bought to sit around in. And here she came out in brand new robe I never had on my back. And then we came in and had been going through all drawers and one thing or another, and I got so mad, and I've never in my life felt towards any person like I began to feel for that girl. And I've never been an evil person, never in my life. But I was while she was in our house. Her mother called at Christmas Day, and we were paying money back to the church. They'd made a mistake in his salary, and he'd asked, it were even in minutes, where he'd asked several times, were they sure they were paying him the right wages? Yes, that were his salary. And when it comes to back part of the year, and it were going to come round to tax time, they hadn't been stopping enough money. And with all those taxes to find. And we were living on a shoestring around Christmas, although we did get we got a turkey because Andrew was coming home and bringing this girl, and I'd baked and whatnot. And we worked like crazy. And she could eat like a horse. And she'd be laying around there and eating while I was going out at my age. I was turned 60, and I were having to go out to work. And I did propose to her then.
Yes, yes.
And I could see what was going to happen. And no, he hadn't proposed to her then.
Yes, he had. It was in the paper. It was announced.
But
Got it
anyway, whichever way it was, I've never felt an evil feeling like it, Charlie. I knew they hadn't to be married, but the devil took me over, and I'm sure that if he hadn't gotten that girl out of that house, they went to visit her brother or somebody, I should have killed her.
Mm.
It were a good job there were no instrument, no gun or anything like that, because the devil was in me, and it was towards her. And I said to George, I said, I'm glad he's taking her away. I said, because I couldn't go through this. I said, if I had an instrument to kill her with, I said, I would. Well, they went back, and he was still going to marry her. So he rang one night, and he told his father, you were going to marry her. And his father told him, he says, you marry her. He says, but you'll never bring her in this house. He says, and you needn't come neither if you marry her. He says, because I won't accept it.
It wasn't the right thing to do.
Anyway, we went to see, and he said that he'd agree whatever President Kim, who is president of the President today, Kimball. And he wasn't then, he was under his missionary, supervisor, whatever you call them. And he said he'd take whatever he said. So we went to see him and had an interview with him. And I told him all about it. And Andre went with us. And he said he'd do whatever President Kimball said. And President Kimball said that he thought he ought to take notice of what his parents were saying, because everything we told him was true. And he said, you will probably have to live it down before, she were accepted. And we came home, and he still said he was going to marry her. And George told him, he says, well, if you're going to do that, he says, don't ever bring her home. He says, you can come, but he says, don't ever bring her. This were over phone. Now I remember. And I shouted to George, I says, and tell him that goes for his mother too. He says, no, he says, I don't believe that. He says, I don't believe mother would do that. So I got up to the phone. I said, Andre, I said, if you marry her, I agree with your father. Don't bring her home, because I don't want her. I said, you'll be sorry. And so I didn't bring her home. And Bishop went to see him. He went out west to a conference. And we asked him to go and see Andre, see if he could persuade him to come home. We felt that if we could get him home without her, he'd probably stay home. Well, he came home. I don't know whether he came with the bishop, but he did come home.
Came home on the 27th of May.
He came home.
1967.
And his father says, you can go if you want to go back. But he says, if you take that car, he says, that's mine. He says, and if you take that car to go back with, he says, I'll put the police on you.
Is there some spiritual part to this now that you were leading up to?
Well,
there is a spiritual
way,
part to
yes.
it, Charles, and that is, I know that what she's been telling you now, there's no spirituality about that. In fact, I think, no, shut up a bit, Florence, I think we were a little cruel with Andre. Since the years have gone by, I feel that I was doing wrong. I wasn't doing the right thing at all, because to be after the manner of the Saviour, when he says, what manner of men ought ye to be after the manner of the Saviour, I couldn't do that when he said that you should love your enemies. But
Anna was sent into our lives.
Yes,
Now
yes,
this is where the
that's
turning
what I
point
was
comes.
going to come to.
Anna were sitting in the church one Sunday, and we'd been invited out to dinner. So he brought Anna home, and Andre was there, and we fed them dinner, and no thought about getting Andre and Anna together. I had no thought about it at all.
No, but you haven't told them the main thing.
She said she wanted to talk to us.
Anna was sat in the foyer, and I said to her, I said, Anna, I said, what's the matter with you? I said, you look awfully sad.
See, there were 4 or 5 of them that come over.
She says, I've got a problem, Brother Hamstead, and I want to talk this problem over with someone. She says, and that someone happens to be you and your wife. I says, look, Anna, I says, all problems that you have should first be taken to your bishop. If you do, but no, I don't want to talk to the bishop.
No,
She
but she'd
says, I
already
want to
been to
talk
bishop,
to
hadn't
you. No, she hadn't been to the bishop. I says, well, she says, I'll call you on the phone and I'll talk it over. I said, I'm not going to talk any problems over the phone, Anna. If you want to talk it with me, you must talk it in my home or someone else's home, I said, in a private place. So I says, well, what about you coming down today? I says, or any day when you have off. She says, I'm off today. I says, well, then let's get in the car and we'll go down. So I took her home. And the problem was with the place where she was working. She couldn't really put up with them. And she was involved in, I think it was $140 odd with them. And so, anyway, the problem come about that Andre was home at that particular time. And we told her that if she wanted to give the job up and we'd find the means of attending to the money problems, this, that and the other. I says, you could come and live here while you get another job in another place to go to. The following Wednesday...
We were expecting Andre was still going back out west, you know.
The following
But his
Wednesday...
father threatened him with car. So he pinned down, he didn't know what to do.
As I said, the following Wednesday she come and to live with us. And I said, well, there's going to be a problem here. I says, we've got... Andre living here, says, and we've 2 rooms upstairs, and what can we do? So anyway, she decided it'd be all right for her to go down and sleep in the basement. Well, Andre was mating around with
Dickie Moyes?
no, wanted one of Karen boys at the time. Dickie Karen, that's right. And there was going to the Watergate. And when they gets to the Watergate, they decided to take Anna with them, and it started a slight courtship with Anna and Andre. And that was where the spirituality come in. I feel that Anna was led into our home through the prayer that she uttered the previous Friday night. She come into our home to solve a problem. Instead of solving her problem, she solves our problem.
And
Okay. Now, if we can pretend like we're talking 10 years down the road.
That's right. I know what you want. You want us to speak to Kenneth, to David, and to Jonathan.
Yeah.
Well, now why don't you do that? And
Well, we'd like both of you to do it.
go on, you go first.
well, Kenneth, David, and Jonathan. Grandma and Grandpa are now getting old, and we wanted you to know just the highlights and problems that we've met through a lifetime, and how the Lord has seen us through and guided us, just like He led the children of Israel and released them from their slavery and brought them out into the light. This is what He's done for us, and He has blessed us. And we now have 2 beautiful grandchildren, Uncle Andre and Auntie Anna have these 2 wonderful little girls, and they were sent to us and have always been appreciated. And Auntie Anna has always loved us and has treated me just like a mother. In fact, she's always said and has told people now where she lives in California that Grandma has been more of a mother to her than her own mother ever was. And I say this in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Well, Kenneth and David and Jonathan, I want to tell you this, that your grandpa has been a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints since July of 1908. That's over 69 years ago now. And I've been all through my life active in the church and tried to do what I could in living according to the principles of the gospel. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm perfect. I'm far from being perfect, because I've made lots of mistakes of which I have been repentant, and I know that the Lord will forgive me. And the reason I'm saying this is I want to advise you and counsel you not to make those mistakes, but to grow up to be the kind of men that Jesus really wants you to be. He wants you, Kenneth and David and Jonathan, to listen always to the counsel of your mom and dad, to do the things that they want you to do, because I know myself that your mom and dad are two chosen people in this world, and they've been sent to give you a newness of life. You have been given to them through the Lord, and He sent you, the Lord has sent you to them because He wants you to follow in the path and the footsteps that they have trod. So please listen to their counsel, to their advice that they give you, and the love that they bestow upon you constantly. Partake of that love, and then we know that all will be well with you as the years and the days go by. And so God bless and keep you always in His loving care. I pray in the name of Jesus Christ, our Redeemer and Savior. Amen.
Amen. Well, thanks, you guys.